And now, for a bit of a change of pace, we have Dan Moroz giving a talk on double spend counterattacks, threat of retaliation in proof of work systems.
I am also the next speaker. So now, if everything looks okay, is complete, then for a double dose of Dan, we have a double spend counterattack paper. And this is going to be about threat of retaliation in proof of work systems. And this is joint work with Neha and my advisor David, and Dan Aronoff, who's at MIT in economics. And I'll say later also, but a big shout out to James Lovejoy, who kind of helped us with the data for this project a lot. Okay, so when let's think about proof of work security. What is the security behind proof of work? Oh, there we go. There's James. So when I think about kind of fundamental blockchain questions, I like to think about, what would Satoshi say? And this is the image I found on the internet. And actually, I found it with the title, "Is Steve Jobs Satoshi Nakamoto? 4 reasons yes, 5 reasons no." This was the title of the blog post where this image was found, just for credit where credit is due. So what did Satoshi say about the security of proof of work? The system is secure as long as the attacker can't get a majority of the hash power on the network. And in that case, transactions are decreasingly likely to be reverted as you wait longer. So people recommend a 6-block limit. After 6 blocks, you're pretty good. If you wait longer, even better. Now, there's been a recent question, and kind of a number of papers recently have asked this. Is proof of work actually safe given the fact that we have hash rate marketplaces? And kind of the prime example of the hash rate marketplace is NiceHash. So recent theory, which has assumed deep hash rate markets, liquid hash rate markets, and a competitive miner economy, that is, that miners aren't making much profit. And some evidence on the latter point is kind of just a quote I picked up from a random article, maybe CoinDesk, which said, if you're not certain you can make profits from cryptocurrency mining, the answer is probably no. Okay, it's not like super trivial these days to make cryptocurrency mining extremely profitable. So with these assumptions, this deep hash rate markets and a competitive miner economy, actually the theory shows that majority attacks, even without double spending, forget double spending, just the attack itself can be quite cheap, even free under some assumptions. A free attack. Sounds crazy. Why? What's the intuitive explanation? Because the attacker is basically using this deep hash rate marketplace. The attacker is going to rent hash rate from the marketplace. What is he going to pay the people who he rents from? He's going to pay exactly the block reward amount that they would have gotten otherwise, because they're making no profits. Yeah? And then when he executes the attack, what is he going to receive, even with no double spend? He's going to receive all the block rewards. That exactly cancels out his purchase. I'll talk about that. Yeah. That's definitely an assumption that many people make. Okay, so here, the transaction that actually, the double spend, if people do a double spend, the transaction is kind of a bonus. Basically, the attack might come for very free or cheap, and then the transaction that you steal is just free money. So these theories kind of predict that in the presence of hash rate marketplaces, deep hash rate marketplaces, and a no-profit, free entry situation for miners, that you actually can get frequent majority attacks, basically no matter how much proof of work is on a chain. Okay, this is not how most people think about proof of work security. Okay. And now, actually, I'm going to argue that the possibility of counterattacks restores safety. So let's look at this comic here. This is a well-known, great comic, XKCD, in which someone like me, a PhD candidate, attacks the defense committee in an attempt to get the PhD. Okay, the best thesis defense is a good thesis offense. And now let's think about this situation. Okay, there's an asymmetry going on here. If no one has a sword, okay, then we can be sure there won't be any attacks. If just the PhD candidate has a sword, there might be some attacks. And now think about what if the the committee also had swords? Okay, the candidate would not be so eager to charge into a field of people who have swords. And that's exactly what we see in this kind of model. In the model that we were talking about before, essentially, we assume that one person has a sword and can go around and attack people. But the people they're attacking don't have swords. They're just stuck. Okay, but what if we assume they also are kind of thinking people with a lot of money on the line, and they can get some swords? So that's the point. So we allow the possibility of a victim's counterattack, and we're going to use the same assumptions, kind of hash rate marketplaces and a competitive miner economy, and we find that the system is actually secure again. And we have, it turns out, preliminary data evidence that counterattacks may happen on the real chain. Okay, so the outline for the rest of the talk. We're going to talk about kind of basics, what double spends are. We're going to talk about this theory of the low-cost or free majority attack. Then we're going to show how allowing retaliation to that model can make majority attack non-fatal and no attack a subgame perfect equilibrium. And then we're going to show some empirical results of double spends and a surprise at the end. Okay, so double spend attack, you guys all know this, but we'll go through just for fun. A, attacker, and D, defender agree to exchange Bitcoin for USD. All right, here we have a great chain. The squiggly line means there were many blocks that came before this. Green is the canonical, kind of longest chain. So what's going to happen? A broadcasts a transaction sending Bitcoin to D. Meanwhile, starting to secretly build an alternate chain. Okay, so here we have A sends to D on the main chain, public. And then in secret, very sneakily, A sends to themselves. That's the dashed line in secret. So now, D waits for E blocks, and that's in our picture, it's going to be 3. Don't be alarmed. I know it's 6 in Bitcoin, but 3. And gives A the USD. So D waits for the requisite number of blocks, safe, and then gives A the USD. Okay? So here, there have been 3 blocks since the transaction. A gets the USD, but secretly, A has already built a longer chain. And here, kind of, the picture, just for the sake of the picture, is 4 long, but really we can just kind of, since it's really the heaviest chain, we can think of it as just epsilon, kind of heavier. And then A releases this heavier chain, which double spends the original Bitcoin outputs to A's address, and A has both the USD and the Bitcoin. Boom. Okay, releases the chain. Now, the bottom chain is the canonical chain, and the transaction to D never happened. It's like it never happened. Okay, those are double spends attacks. Nice. So now, what is the theory of this low-cost majority attack? So this is, there's work on this from Budish in 2018, from Auer in 2019, from Hasu in 2019, and actually Bonneau kind of referenced this even back in 2016. What are the assumptions they make? Miner free entry leads to 0 profits, okay? If anyone can join the miner game, then profits will soon be eked out because the difficulty adjustment goes up. And 2, an attacker has access. For some reason, it could be private access, you know, they have a deal, or it could be public access, like NiceHash. Attacker has access to a liquid hash rate market in which they can rent a majority of hash power. Those are the assumptions. And what's the result you get from these assumptions? is that attacks are cheap. Cheap, but free? Could they even be free? The answer is yes. In a competitive miner economy, so we're going to go through in a little bit of detail, but I think it's going to be satisfying. The reward per block that the system should pay out per block is kind of the total amount of money, that the whole world is spending per block. That is the total world mining expenditure per block. So that's the hashes, total hashes made kind of per block around the world, times the cost at each hash. And that's PB. And so this is it. This is kind of an equilibrium equality. This PB is the block reward, right? So we're saying the block reward is going to be the cost of hashing a block. Oh. Okay, too slow. Uh-oh, giving it away. Okay, so remember, this is our double spend on the right. Okay, so now, what is the net cost of a length E attack? The attacker has to kind of make E blocks. It's going to be the hash cost of mining E blocks minus the block rewards of mining E blocks. Now let's go in detail. What's the hash cost of a length? What's the hash cost of a lengthy attack? It's going to be E times the hash per block times the cost per hash. And this is kind of what this is due to the kind of equilibrium price and the fact that the miner can rent. So the attacker is going to rent for this price basically the ability to generate E blocks, right? Because we're assuming that miners are making no profits, so they would sell their mining hash power for the same price. That's the assumption. Okay, so the cost is going to be E times PB, right, because of this equality earlier. And now, the block rewards from the attack, there's going to be E blocks that the person makes, and since actually the attacker wins in this model, the attacker wins, so the attacker actually gets those E blocks on the chain, and so they're going to get E block rewards, EPB. And so what's the net cost of attack going to be? It's going to be EPB, kind of hash cost, minus block rewards, EPB. That's zero. That's zero, ladies and gentlemen. And what's the benefit from the attack? The benefit is the double spent transaction itself, worth V. So to repel attacks, kind of think about a network. If a network wants to repel attacks, the net cost of attack has to be greater than the benefit from attack. And zero ain't going to be bigger than any V on any chain, regardless of how much proof of work it has on it. Okay, so if all these assumptions hold, we got a zero cost attack. So now let's consider, as the gentleman from London suggested, price impact, and we're going to consider another kind of market impact as well. We're going to call these kappa and delta. So we're going to call the hash rate market impact kappa. So the hash rate cost of an attack is actually, you're going to incur some slippage, basically. If you ever try to buy a large amount in any kind of exchange, right, you never get the price you want, which is like displayed. It's always fake news, right? Because there's slippage, so the price goes up. Because you're eating away at the underlying support. So the hash rate cost of an attack, let's say, is going to be 1 plus kappa. So kappa is going to be positive. So if kappa is 1, then you've doubled the price. So it's a 1 plus kappa kind of multiplicative impact. So 1 plus kappa times E times the hash per block times the cost per hash. That's this part we had before. We're just adding 1 plus kappa. Yeah? And now, what are the block rewards going to be from the attack? Well, we're going to assume that actually, as many people suggest, the price might fall during an attack. And so the value of those actual block rewards after you've done the attack is less than they would have been otherwise. Right? And we're going to call the how much it fell that delta. So that's a 1 minus delta multiplicative parameter. So now, this is all like a stylized version of what's in those papers that I cited. We kind of made some modifications, but this is kind of the general idea. So To repel attacks, now the net cost of attack has to be greater than the benefit of attack. What's the net cost of attack? Remember, it's going to just be the hash cost minus the block rewards. Okay, so we get 1 plus kappa EPB minus 1 minus delta EPB. That has to be greater than V. And so that gives us a safety condition. Kind of if you want to protect transactions up to a certain size, V, and you assume market impact parameters, kappa and delta, and an escrow period, E, how big does your block reward have to be to convince miners that it's actually better to do the honest thing and not incur the penalty of kind of doing the attack and have the price fall and so on? That's how big the block reward has to be to make the system safe. And today, Bitcoin probably has safe values, to be clear, has very safe values of kappa and delta. As you cannot, as far as I'm aware, you cannot rent even close to 51% of the Bitcoin hash rate anywhere. I mean, no one will sell it to you. At least on the open market. You know, I'm sure if you kind of were connected to the Chinese miner kind of community, that would be a little different. And today, probably, I think most people make the assumption that the price, that if Bitcoin specifically is attacked, and there is a double spend attack, then kind of people will lose confidence in the fact that transactions can't be reversed, and so the price will fall dramatically. That's the assumption that most people make today. But by the way, our theory will not rely on kind of the price falling. But kind of, so today, Bitcoin has safe values of these coins such that the block reward is enough. Block reward is enough to keep us safe on Bitcoin. But there are many, many other chains. And on many of those chains, you can get enough hash rate, you know, with barely any market impact. And even, as we've literally seen, the coin can be attacked not once, not twice, 10 times, 20 times. And basically, the price on one attack, the price might fall a little bit. After another attack, the price might rise. What? The price rises after an attack? Yeah, maybe because it's like such an insignificant chain that just the fact that there's news about it, you know, reminds people about it, whatever. So there's like insane things that go on with these kind of parameters in the real world on minor chains. And I also want to indicate that actually right now we're in kind of a very immature stage of the blockchain kind of market development. There's pretty low amounts of like good derivatives. There's basically there's no good hash rate market. I mean, nice hash is such a pain to work with. And there's no hash rate derivatives, you know, but these things are all coming. I mean, like professionals are coming. So the market for hash rate in Bitcoin, I argue, is going to get a lot more liquid. There are going to be hash rate derivatives, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so now let's get to the kind of interesting point that retaliation can make a majority attack non-fatal and no attack a subgame perfect equilibrium. That is, the mere possibility that the defender may retaliate, like the sword situation, the mere fact that the professors have the swords might prevent the candidate from attacking in the first place. So the defender can get hash rate too. The professors can get swords. Okay, so here's our double spend, kind of the start of our double spend. So we're going to call this a kind of a game where the attacker here has 0 because the attacker's kind of given up their transaction, and the victim has kind of 100 points or kind of a value. The transaction's worth 100. Now the attacker is going to spend $10 basically to do the attack, and is therefore going to get the value worth 100. Okay? So here we see the attacker doing the attack as before, and true as I promised, the attacker has now a value of 100. That's the transaction they stole, minus 10, that's the cost of the attack, and the victim is left with 0, zip. Okay, and all the prior kind of work basically assumes that the game stops there. The victim just says, well, I guess I got robbed. Okay? But actually, the victim is leaving a lot on the line. Because actually, the victim can just build 2 blocks here, as you can see, regain the chain, regain the transaction. Okay? And so the victim can spend $10 of their own to get the $100 back. Would the victim rather have 0 or 90? Probably 90. Assuming the game stops there, of course. Yeah. So the assumptions we make are equal access to hash power and quick response. So everyone can respond quickly, and everyone has access to this hash market. Furthermore, we assume the net profit of attack decreases with every attack. And this is a kind of condition that allows us to end the game at all. And for example, you can imagine this condition. A special case of this condition is that the attack cost remains constant, or kind of decreasing at a low rate, but the price of the asset decreases heavily after each attack. So, and then we also assume that the defender has a higher penalty to losing than the attacker. And this is going to be our kind of asymmetry. And the justification for this is kind of like the defenders are typically, what we've seen before, the defenders are exchanges. Kind of the people who get robbed are exchanges. Exchanges have reputations. They're big companies. They're making a lot of profit. And it's bad press if something comes out about them that, oh, this exchange got double spent. And, after this talk, didn't defend themselves. So here's our kind of modified points, kind of values. So before the attack, attacker's at 0, V's at 100. And then if the attacker succeeds in the attack, right, the attacker pays 10, they get 100. But the victim actually suffers a reputation cost minus R. That's going to be our shift to the model. And that kind of continues if there's counterattacks and so on. Okay, and what's the result? The result is actually deterrence, where the threat of counterattack yields a no-attack equilibrium. The victim's ability to counterattack discourages an attacker from double spending in the first place. What's the intuition behind this result? Both A and V have a holdout time beyond which the cost of attack is higher than the best possible reward. Remember, we're kind of imagining that the net cost of attack is decreasing as time goes on. In particular, we assumed, though we don't need this assumption, that price is decreasing, for example. So their value of the transaction they're fighting over is kind of decreasing every time. It's decreasing until the point where the cost of the attack, 10, is actually more than the value of the transaction, because once it's been double spent 100 times on Bitcoin, it's worthless. But you still have to, there might be still people doing proof of work on it. Okay. So why? The cost of attack remains fixed while potential reward decreases. If A knows that V's holdout time, if the attacker knows, here I use V and before I use D, so that's a little confusing. V stands for victim. Okay, if A knows that the victim's holdout time is larger than A's, both expect that the victim will fight for longer than A. So the attacker knows that the victim actually has this reputation cost, and therefore they have a longer holdout time. Eventually, V will win, though at some cost. And A, knowing this, should not start the fight, because if they start the fight and V ends up winning, then A takes a big loss in the amount of money that they spent for nothing just to the market for renting hash rate. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some empirical results. Where have we seen double spends in the wild? A lot of places. Double spends, known and unknown. Big thanks to James Lovejoy, who wrote the kind of tracker that allowed us to track kind of over 20 chains and just kind of see where our node got messages of, oh, okay, we're going to have a reorg here, kind of, which is often a signal of a double spend attack. We can just see, so it's kind of over a year ago, we had a huge double spend attack on Bitcoin Gold, 17 million. And kind of recently, we've had a large number of double spend attacks on kind of a number of chains, on Expanse, on Vertcoin, on Bitcoin Gold. We had kind of 8 in a row over a couple days. And kind of the amount of money being stolen is not enormous, but it's substantial. So there's been a number of real double spends in the wild. And now a very exciting new development and see a forthcoming blog post for this, is that on a unnamed chain, okay, there's a mystery, so you have some incentive to look it up. There's going to be a value of a transaction. It's going to be 50K USD, and we calculated it costs about 1 to 2K to do each double spend attack. And we actually saw the following thing play out on the chain in real time. We didn't see it in real time. Our tracker saw it in real time, but you know. Okay, so the attacker did a double spend. They reversed a transaction, and if we consider the block, we think that the block times, the timestamps that they kind of published on their blocks are honest. So we're going to assume that. So that took 3 hours for the miner to kind of mine enough to do a double spend. And then, then they revealed the double spend. That was instantaneous to reveal. Okay, and then in 20 minutes after that, the defender noticed, hey, someone just stole 50K from me. And they turned on their miners, or got someone to turn on miners, and actually fought back and mined on the previous chain. That's right. Mined on the previous chain and fought back and overtook. So paid 1K to get 50K back. And then the attacker, not to be dissuaged, attacked again. They turned on their miners, and they went and attacked again. They spent another 1 to 2K and stole back the 50K. And finally, the grand finale, the defender coming in. Oh, sorry. Sorry, before that. Actually, this is meant to indicate that actually there's a number of miners who are bystanders, basically, who are building on whatever chain is currently the longest chain. So that happened in each of these stages, and this is not a 2-scale graphic. You know, these were like 10 and kind of 15 blocks and so on, not 5. Anyway, for the grand finale, the attacker coming in 30 minutes later actually fought back again, turned on their miners again, and stole that transaction back. The victim, the attacker did not counterattack after that, and so the victim actually kept their transaction after all. After a battle, 4-long battle, turning on, off miners, spending like 10K to do this attack. It's a great saga. Okay, summary. A simple theory shows that it could be cheap to attack some chains because rewards pay for the mining cost. We agree, and we've seen some attacks on some chains. Some chains are safe from this right now. But actually, we show a game theoretic model in which double spending may not occur in equilibrium even if an attack is cheap. And there's evidence that attacks can lose. Okay, in future work, we kind of wonder if we can consider this general kind of way of thinking for other kind of blockchain attacks. So as a great example, I think, of what has already been discovered in the literature, so selfish mining is probably the most famous result, I'd say, in the kind of incentive. It was kind of maybe the first and most interesting result in kind of incentive violations in proof-of-work cryptocurrencies. And we've seen, actually now, there's more work has come out, like, why don't people see selfish mining? It doesn't happen it's like happens in theory, it doesn't happen in the wild. Why? You would be able to tell if there were selfish mining. Why doesn't it happen? Well, maybe there's some theory that shows that if multiple people are selfish mining, then actually none of them actually gain much benefit. So if you assume that other people are strategic, kind of the equilibrium plays out that no one actually gains anything by attacking. So you don't bother attacking. And so that's kind of a similar in spirit, I think, to our idea, and I'm sure it can be applied other places as well. And I think it's also extremely important is the impact of liquid derivative hash rate and token marketplaces. Kind of, we haven't really seen great liquidity in those marketplaces yet. And when we will, I suspect there's hell to come. Okay, thank you.